Ooh, she sounds and
I
angry
call to
tonight.
order the Plan Commission specially scheduled meeting of August 30, 2016. With that, we'll proceed with roll call.
Mr. Foster?
Here.
Mr. Holman?
Here.
Ms. Lazaris?
Here.
Mr. Mills?
Here.
Mr. Schwartz?
Here.
Mr. Pearson?
Here,
And Mr. Magnuson previously informed staff he'd be absent this evening.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, next item 3, correction and/or approval of the minutes of June 28, 2016.
so moved, as printed.
I'll second it.
So moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay. In that case, we'll proceed with a roll call vote.
Mr. Holman?
Aye.
Ms. Lazaris?
Aye.
Mr. Mills?
Abstain.
Mr. Schwartz?
Abstain.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Motion passed.
Okay.
4 votes.
Item number 4, questions and public comment. The public may address the commission at this time regarding items on the agenda unless the item is the subject of a public hearing. If your comments pertain to a public hearing, please hold your comments until the hearing. We do have one public hearing this evening. Item number 5, a conditional use request by Central States Tower and Verizon Wireless for erecting a wireless communications tower with equipment and backup at 200 Water Street. Public comment may also be made at this time on items not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting. The state's open meeting law discourages action by the commission on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. State your name and address when starting your comments. Also fill out the sign-in sheet at the podium. At this time, are there any public comments? Okay, all right. Hearing none, we'll proceed with item number 5, public hearing, conditional use request, Central States Tower, 3rd LLC, 323 South Hale Street, Wheaton, Illinois, and Verizon Wireless, 1515 Woodfield Road, Schaumburg, Illinois, for the purpose of erecting a wireless communications monopole with equipment, shelter, and backup generator, parcel 246-0713-1322-052, 200 Water Street. We have with us today representing Central States Tower, Mr. Nathan Ward, and when we get to the public hearing portion of this public hearing, as it were, and further into that, then we may hear from him. We'll start out with the Plan Commission motion 1681. Conditional use permit declarations and findings, 200 Water Street, Central States Tower, the 3rd LLC, and Verizon Wireless LLC. Motion 1681 sets forth the city zoning authority, zoning applications applicable to the downtown district and the planned institutional overlay district. The request by the City of Lake Mills and lessees Central States Tower and Verizon Wireless for conditional use permit for a communications tower. The review by staff and consultants on the proposed tower. Tonight's public hearing and review by Plan Commission. This motion recommends approval of the communications tower conditional use subject to 1, that the site plan meet all city code requirements, 2, the use be restricted to the portion of the property at 200 Water Street that is subject to a long-term lease with the City of Lake Mills. This motion also confirms the following findings regarding the requested conditional use. 1, the proposed use will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare. 2, the proposed use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted or substantially diminish and impair property values. 3, the proposed use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property. 4, there are adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and/or other necessary facilities. 5, ingress and egress will be so designed as to minimize traffic congestion. 6, the proposed use shall conform to applicable zoning district regulations. 7, the proposed use at its proposed location is in harmony with the purposes, goals, objectives, policies, and standards of the city's comprehensive plan. 8, the potential public benefits outweigh any and all potential adverse impacts. That is the motion before us. And before we start the public hearing itself, I'd like to hear from our planning consultant, Dustin Wolf, and if you would present your findings on this
Sure.
request.
Thank you. The petitioners have been working with the city for quite some time in the evaluation and development of this site. That's the petition that's been brought before you. As you indicated, City Hall site is zoned B1, PIO, so that's the downtown business with the it's public institutional overlay. There's a little typo in the motions. We'll need to just make sure that that's corrected. The tower, being a new tower, is permitted within the public institutional overlay as a conditional use, which is why we're here tonight. So the zoning code does outline kind of a series of questions that need to be answered in the affirmative, so to speak, as it relates to the development and surrounding land uses. First is, does the proposed conditional use is it in harmony with the comprehensive plan? The comprehensive plan doesn't specifically make recommendations regarding the location of wireless facilities. The comprehensive plan does talk about wireless facilities and provisions of quasi-public utilities. So it is in keeping with those goals to ensure that there is a good system of utilities that includes communication facilities. Those of you who may have wireless, Verizon Wireless in Lake Mills will know that reception is somewhat spotty. So this will rectify that substandard service that has been experienced for a number of years here, kind of in the heart of Lake Mills. Does the conditional use result in substantial or undue adverse impact on adjacent property? The location on the site of City Hall site, as you can see from the site plan, is the extreme southern end. It's immediately adjacent to the DNR fisheries lands, so a lot of wide open space to the south. No development will occur there. To the east is multifamily sites, and there's a parking lot. So the tower location and the mechanicals, the equipment, won't be impacting any properties directly. So it will certainly be visible. A 125-foot tall tower certainly will be visible, but the tower itself will be far enough away from homes where there won't be real shadows and other potential adverse impacts on those properties. Does the conditional use maintain the desired consistency of land uses, land use intensities, and land use impacts related to the environment of the property? Staff's opinion is yes, because of the fishery lands being so wide open and no development is going to occur there, and that this is a public and institutional district. There is a tower on site that's been used for city purposes. It is substantially smaller than the proposed tower, but there have been communication facilities on this site for a number of years, so this is just going to continue. Would the proposed conditional use be adequately served by public infrastructure? It certainly is very accessible. There are no new services necessary to serve this. It's standard electric, etc. The maintenance of the tower is easily accessible, and the mechanicals, equipment are just generally checked on every few weeks, is my understanding, to ensure that everything's in operating order. To the public benefits, outweigh any and all adverse impacts. It's staff's opinion that they do. The petitioners have provided a wall surrounding the mechanicals that mimics the wall that's already located here at City Hall site, and they've proposed some landscaping to kind of buffer the edges of the wall, even though it'll all match the existing building here. I think the petitioner has done more than an adequate job of trying to address or minimize any potential impacts associated with a new structure being at the rear of the site. So, staff is recommending that the Plan Commission recommend its approval to the council.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wolf. We are in public hearing. Does anyone wish to make a comment concerning this request? If so, then please approach the podium, writing down your name and address, and also speaking your name and address for the record and the listening viewers. Would anyone like to speak to this request at this time? Okay. All right, hearing none, then we close the public hearing, and we go to item number 6, discussion recommendation, conditional use request, Central States Tower the Third LLC, 323 South Hale Street, Wheaton, Illinois, and Verizon Wireless, 1515 Woodfield Road, Schaumburg, Illinois, for the purpose of erecting a wireless communications monopole with equipment shelter and backup generator, parcel 24607131322 200 Waters Street. We are in discussion recommendation at this time. Plan commissioners, do you have any questions of Mr. Ward or of the staff?
Question, is the city going to derive some income from putting that tower there?
There's a long-term lease that the council has already approved, and there will be income associated with it. I don't recall, maybe Elizabeth remembers the exact annual amount, but there will be income to the city.
I'm sorry, I
And
don't
I'm-
remember how much that is.
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
I don't remember how much that was.
Okay, but there is something coming into the,
Yes.
so the public will have some money coming for it.
Correct.
One more question, and I'll be done. For those of us who don't have cable, is that going to interfere with tower antennas for TVs in the area?
It shouldn't. Should be different frequencies. Shouldn't be any crossover impacts. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Ward, if you would like to comment, certainly.
Certainly. Good evening, Nathan Ward, Buell Consulting for Central States Tower and Verizon Wireless. Would you like my address?
Yes, go ahead.
I reside at 1200 Riva Ridge in Racine, Wisconsin. Fortunately for us, the Verizon antennas, as well as all communications, are regulated by the FCC, and we all work within our own frequency bands. So to answer the gentleman's question, no, the frequencies at which we will operate will not affect TV or radio or other facilities.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions for Mr. Ward? Yes,
Will there be any piggybacking, like AT&T puts stuff up there and all that?
I think the answer to that question is yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry. The viewers can't hear you if you don't go to the microphone.
The answer to that question is yes. It's probably just a matter of time. The pole itself is designed currently for just a second add-on tenant. We're very limited in the amount of ground space that's available here on the property. So I believe what Central States will do is actually design the pole to support even a third carrier. And if the second one comes along and then there is a request for a third, they would have to come back to the city and potentially negotiate some additional ground space either in the parking area or perhaps with your adjacent property to the east. I believe somehow they're affiliated with the city. So,
Well, I hope AT&T does, because it's got bad reception here.
yeah, everyone else is located outside of town, including Verizon. So, your nearest facility is on the very south edge of town, just as you cross out of the city limits, with the U.S. Cellular facility there that AT&T currently occupies as well. And that's just simply too far away to provide the service that you folks are looking for right here in town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Commissioners. Does anyone else have a question for Mr. Ward? Hi. Well, thank you, Mr. Ward. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ms.
Ms. Staff?
Lazaris,
Yes.
I inadvertently referred to the zoning district as planned instead of public institutional.
Yeah.
I can
public.
make that change before there's a decision and a signing of the motion,
Oh, okay.
unless somebody wants to actually make a formal amendment. Otherwise, if you want to consider it just a typo, I can go back to my computer and make that
Okay.
change.
So if someone wanted to make a motion concerning this prepared motion, they could, just and say corrected to describe the overlay as public. They could do it that way. Okay.
We don't have to, if she can go back and fix it first.
Just let her go back and fix it.
She'll just fix it before you sign it.
She said it's fixable before we do this. So she can go fix it right now before we read it.
Actually, it's already been read, but,
Oh, you're right.
it's just a simple.
It's just a typo, so.
Yeah,
just a simple
Just
typo.
before it goes out, you'll correct the typo?
Yeah.
That's all.
That's
Yeah, the
fine.
P was supposed to stand for public, and I inadvertently called it planned.
That's all right.
Not a big deal.
Okay. All right, is there a motion concerning this plan motion 1681?
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? And we understand it to mean with the substitution of public rather than planned.
Plan, right.
Okay. And they'll let that just be noted. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve this motion 1681. Any discussion?
I had a great joke, but I'll keep it to myself in regard to screening, but
Okay, then. Well, thank you, Mr. Holman. Okay, all right. Very well.
no.
All right, well. All right, very well, then we'll proceed with the roll call vote.
Mrs. Zaris?
Aye.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Short?
Aye.
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Holman?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
That's it.
Aye, thank you, thank you, thank you, Mr. Ward. All right, the next item is item number 7. Discussion on outdoor storage lake overlay district. And we have Mr. Wolf, if you would go ahead and present what you've been thinking about in this matter.
The city, over a number of months, has been receiving some concerns from some lake property owners about storage of lake-related equipment. Typically, it's piers and the boat lifts in the off-season. Specifically, the location of where they're being stored on private property. So, a lake owner will take out his pier or his boat lift and usually store it somewhere on their property during the winter months, which is not normally an issue. The code, as you know, certainly does talk about how to store a lot of things, but it does not specifically address piers or boat lifts. And to make the world a little bit easier for the city attorney and for the zoning inspector, it's felt that there might need to be some additional language in the Lakeshore Overlay District for outdoor storage of those types of equipment. So we do have regulations for storing boats and boat trailers, and it's specific as to how those can be stored on someone's property, but the piers and lifts are not specifically addressed, so it's kind of a gray area. Conversations with at the city staff level was if we were to have some regulation for piers and the boat lifts, certainly shouldn't be allowed in front of the home at all, generally between the roadway and the home. that it should only be allowed behind the house, meaning behind the leading edge of the house, and it shouldn't be allowed in any required setback, side or side yard setback areas. And then the last piece was that you shouldn't allow that type of storage in the summer months. So it's really just allowed in the winter months. Presumably they'll be using the pier and the boat lift in the summer months. So it'll be in the lake. When it's in the lake, it's regulated by the DNR. When it's out of the lake, it's regulated by the city. So that's what we were kind of toying with and thought we would get a little bit of input from you. And then based on that, the next step would be to actually draft some ordinance language and bring that to you for a public hearing, for public comment.
Mr. Wolf, would you not be able to just revise or add to even section 10 to 11, outdoor storage and parking of recreational vehicle trailers and boats, and then add to that? Would you be able to do it that way?
We could look at that. The thought was making sure that we were just clear on that, how they were handled, because it only applies to riparians. It doesn't.
Right,
It doesn't
right.
apply to. You don't have to be You don't have to live on the lake to have a boat or a boat,
Yeah.
and storing that. And so.
Well, true, yeah.
So
because
we just thought we might just put it in the language that just impacted riparians, but we can explore that. We can bring that back as an option.
I have a question with that. Rather than, I guess, like in the lead up to it, I guess, I don't understand what Vicky's going through to begin with. So until I know that.
Okay. What happens is one property owner complains about another property owner. The neighbor doesn't like the way something's
Yeah.
being stored,
Okay.
and then
Yeah, I get that part. But here's the thing. When you have the sheer number of lake lots, the crazy number, and all these years, most of those lifts have been put in the same place for the last 40 years. I think we should go about this one a little differently. I think before we just decide to make a rule, I think those people should be involved. Like either a work session or some kind of informal meeting downstairs. Invite all of them, every lake owner, and get some input, so it isn't just the antis against the people who aren't having any problem. I mean, is that somewhat logical? I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that's...
and like I say, I don't know the problem or the how many, but what if it's only two? Maybe we can just work around the two. You know what I mean?
exactly.
And not create another
rule and regulation. yeah.
Well, and it sounds to me like we're trying to regulate common sense.
I mean, it could be. I mean, I know we
mean,
went round and round with the Title
I'm not
10
going to put
thing.
my
on the-
pier out in the front of my house,
Yeah, I don't know. But once again, I don't know what city staff is going through. I mean, if it's two people or if it's
Yeah, you get
20
inundated with
people?
calls
or
I'm only aware of two neighbors that are having a dispute over this.
So we're going to make all kinds of rules and regulations because two people
Yeah.
can't get along.
Regulations
I
for
don't
two
think so. We got enough rules and regulations now.
Because, I would
Somehow they gotta
maybe,
work it out.
Have the two duke it out.
yeah, I would maybe...
that's the problem. Is
talk to
that-
them about what the obvious intent is of the city code and for where storage of things should be located on one's lot. And I think that if they could be persuaded by common sense of what the obvious intent of storing things would be, that might be helpful. The other thing you can do, you can just tack on these items, because the code is pretty good about the placement of things, about storage on these lots. So I think
because maybe
conditions.
the person that is complaining, it has that right to complain, and maybe the person that is the, you know, the person with the boat lift in front of their house, maybe they actually could move it. But I'm
So,
just saying, what if they
I
can't, we
understand.
don't know anything.
I understand what
It's
you're saying,
hypothetical.
but here's the issues from the city staff's perspective. When there's a complaint on something, and the city staff has to go to the code book to say,
There's no code.
this is
It's
what the code
absent,
says,
yeah.
there's no code that tells the city how to advise
Specifically.
them. And so that's
Yeah,
where
there
the
is.
city gets caught in the middle, where,
You tell them there's no
It's-
code that covers it.
so then they can put
do
it
what they-
anywhere.
That's exactly
That's just-
right.
That's
See,
the
that-
issue.
That's what would happen.
There's
They would
nothing
feel
wrong
like
with
they
that.
could
But there is
anywhere.
something wrong with that, Mr. Foster, because one property owner is aggrieved by another property owner.
That property owner needs to get over it then, because if there is no
That's not an
regulation.
acceptable answer in government.
Yes, it
You
is.
cannot, yes, it is. You cannot regulate based on one person complaining. The squeaky
No.
wheel does not always get the grease.
Today, just because we have one resident and property owner who has a conflict with one other, doesn't mean that in the future we won't have other residents who are aggrieved by the same problem at a different site.
And then we'll bring it
So
up then.
by
if we have
regulating
more.
now, we save ourselves the problem of revisiting this issue at a later
Not-
date.
Not really.
No,
You've
Because now you're
informed the
taking
city that
rights-
they should just
You're
tell
taking more
them.
rights away from a homeowner
yep.
based
I-
on one person.
I hear
and that's
all,
just
I
not
hear all
right.
of you.
I think that what the thought process from city staff was on this was not to create a law just to satisfy two neighboring property owners, but if you recall, when Title X was being rewritten, we spent a long time talking about where on a lot you could store boats
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
trailers and things, and it never addressed boat lifts, and so
I think that could go on the same list, and it would be
Why
easy
can't
to
we just
do.
say this then? I mean, to save time, why can't we just add that the docks or the whatever have to stay in the backyard?
Can.
I mean,
would-
if that's,
That- this is the
if
process.
if that's all we need to do to add
I
that
would
little.
think that that would be just,
That
it
would
would
be
be that
sufficient,
simple, and it was just an oversight. We never even, it wasn't on our radar to think about those as what would also belong in such a section.
But-
Yeah, but then you're gonna get the people who say, well, now it's in the backyard, it's blocking my view of the lake. I want it moved. When do you end?
Yeah.
When do you stop it?
Exactly, I agree.
Boat lifts are a
The
unique
neighbors should
animal,
work it
too.
out themselves.
Because we already have that right now with someone saying his wall's too high. Now it's blocking my lake view that I've had for 40 years. When do you stop? I mean, you're gonna hit every squeaky wheel, and then you're gonna have people moving out of the city because they can't do anything on their property.
And boat lifts are a unique animal. They're, you know, they're craned out of the lake. They're craned onto a trailer that has a crane to set them off. It's not exactly like hooking on a boat hitch. So there's a little bit of a moving issue with them.
This really puts the staff in an awkward position, because then all they're going to tell
Yeah.
property owners is, we have no rules. Put them
Yeah.
wherever you want.
I see
And that's
that.
an answer.
It's not, I'm just saying,
It's
for-
still an answer.
but that doesn't mean that the issue goes away.
They can
Why
fight
should-
all
why
they
is it up-
want, but then they don't have to call city council because or call the city staff because they have their answer.
That's one of the roles of government, is to be the intermediary on these types of disputes.
Yeah, but you don't need to fix every squeaky wheel. And that's what we're trying to do. Now, if we have 100 people, 100 families down there, 100 properties down there, and 51 of them say, we got a problem,
So let's go
Then
back
we-
to
then
Mr.
we
Holman's
will adjust.
case. Mr. Holman said, can't you have a meeting with the lake property owners and get their input? What if 20 of the attendees say, yes, we want it, now that you bring the issue up?
Absolutely, then I think it's really viable then.
Yeah,
I think
that,
it's
that
really
makes a
viable.
smart move.
The
I
city
know
staff is
we
not
were-
advocating for new
Put it
regulation.
on them.
City staff is trying to add clarity where there is none.
Now, that makes perfect sense there, because then then they're buying into it.
I'm fine with that. I try to understand, the
I
city
like
staff's
that
not
idea.
pushing
I agree.
for this.
Good thought.
We're just trying
I
to
think it's a good
provide
idea.
clarification where there is none in the code.
I disagree from what I've seen. in the
You know, I don't think it's the city's obligation to be answering all these things and giving the permission for this and permission for that. People should be able to work these things out themselves. I mean, why does the city have to be the big brother to overlook every little thing that goes on in life out there?
Because we have the zoning code.
Yeah.
We're the
I
ones who
know.
regulate
I know.
land.
I put in a whole lot of time on that zoning code also. I don't disagree with all of it, but, like Mr. Foster said, one person. We're gonna write rules and regulations for one person? How socialist are we gonna get?
Well, I know when we worked on the rewrite, we were very careful. You know, when it came to the boathouse section and the overlay district, we did involve and invite the shoreland owners to, I think we had actually a couple of meetings where they were invited to see what they thought about proposed regulations, and they did provide some helpful input into that whole process. So, planning commissioners, I'm hearing probably about 3 or 4 different opinions from you about what we should do about this complaint that has arisen, and about the prospect of amending the code accordingly. So, what do you want to do about these matters?
I have another question. That'll only involve the city of Lake Mills lots, won't it? So it will not be township lots.
Correct.
So the lakes are going around the north end there where you come around Tyrrena Park and all the boat lifts are right on the shoreline. That has nothing to do with it.
And it certainly was the intention
Interesting.
to, if we were to add regulation, to prevent people from putting it right on the shoreline. We just want to make it clear you couldn't put it right on a lot line or in a front yard.
Yeah.
I seem to recall it's also not in a required side yard. So
Yes.
if your required side yard is what, maybe 10, 12 feet from the lot line, it's not supposed to be there. So if you have more on your side yard than that, you could put it closer to your house. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that is correct.
Do you think that'll have any detriment to the likes of people annexing? If they have, let's just say that some of those people in the township would gradually annex and they have no place for their boat lifts, do you think that would be a deterrent?
Well,
Don't know.
They might
I mean, we
want to
haven't
be
looked at property by
well
property.
advised as
No, I
to
just
what
mean a
pertains to them, if
considerable
they should
amount of them on the
annex.
north end side that are, right on the lake. And not that, I don't know, it's just a question, not that there's a bunch of people wanting to annex.
If I had mine to annex, I would look at the rules, code of that jurisdiction and see if that was a good idea or not. So I think it's up to them to see what they should be
I guess
doing.
after thinking about this while the rest of you were talking, I would, after some investigation, it wouldn't be that I'd be against adding it to our code based on some input, because we went through this a lot when we developed Title 10 about giving staff direction. In fact, we turned over a bunch of direction to staff over the years, as far as just follow the code and then bring it to us. We used to approve I was attending meetings where we decided the color of the brick, and now we developed a code that allows staff to present a packet to us, and that's how the evolution has been. So I don't want to be on both sides of this fence. We created some help to staff, and now I don't want to be part of hindering it. But by the same token, I would just like to see some input from the property owners before just changing the code. So that's my position at this point.
How about the rest of you? What do you, What you want to do, would you agree with Mr. Holman? Would you like to hear from the property owners?
I think that's smart. I think if, rather than us just dictating, I think you ought to just, if nobody shows up and nobody feels it's that important, then we know where we're at. We don't have to do anything.
I agree. I agree
Or-
100%.
Or
if they
or
all
we
show
can
up,
do something,
or
because
if-
there's no opposition to it. I mean, we could look at it the other way either,
Well,
too.
I'm just saying, if it's not that important for somebody to show up to voice their opinion on it, then we don't have to do it. We don't have to touch it.
But what I'm saying, or we can just add it, or we
well,
can just
or you
add it
just
to the
add it,
setback
yes,
thing.
you could
You know what I'm
you could
saying?
just add
And
it.
then
If
they
you're not
have,
gonna- if
and
nobody's
then they
gonna
have
come in to
direction.
oppose it,
Yeah.
yes.
You know what I'm saying? If
Because-
people aren't willing to stand up for themselves and say, no, I've been putting this boat lift in my front yard for 45 years, and I'm at this meeting to protest the change of the rule, if none of those people show, then we could change it by that
I
psychology
think
also.
that makes
You know,
sense.
that is the,
Yeah.
as Ms. Schmidt said, that is the purpose of the public hearing as well.
Yeah.
It's to solicit that input.
The problem is, Dustin, that we can't get anybody to the public hearing, you know?
Well, there's a couple things we could do. We can either just send a letter out and invite them to a very brief meeting at City Hall.
Yeah,
to
it
say,
would be
this is
more
what we
of
want to
an
talk about.
informational
Or we
discussion.
can send them a letter with, with some information and a self-addressed stamped envelope that says, provide us with your comments based on these things and mail them back to us so they don't have to necessarily attend a meeting. I mean, there are things
great
that can be done.
That's a great
Great
idea.
I think it's a
I
good
thought that.
idea, because we were careful to
See where it
invite them
goes.
twice in the rewrite, because, that's a particular group of people, a group of owners.
We
and-
can-
And they are
Yeah.
different.
They deal with some
So-
unique things because there's only a handful of them that live on the lake.
Yeah,
So, we can send them a letter that outlines, this issue has been brought to the attention of the city. Here are some things, do you find this to be a concern? Here are some things that can be done. Are you supportive of that, not supportive of that? And then we can just kind of compile the results.
And then make it a little bit more explicit in the letter, because we are going to act on it, one way
Yeah,
or the
because-
other.
because it's-
Yes.
because
so that
it's
they-
come up.
So that's almost a forced opinion.
that,
you know.
there would be a consideration of regulating the outdoor storage. You just be very specific.
If you are opposed to it, you need to tell us
Yeah.
directly.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think
I
if
like
we,
that.
if we had thought about those items during the time that we worked on section 10 to 11 on outdoor storage, then I think we would have added those things. We probably would have said, well, we have this in the proposed code, what do you think of it? We probably would have said that at the time, but we
And-
didn't think about it.
And it would have been really fair to them, because we had all them
Yeah.
public hearings.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it would have, it would have been more fair to them.
Yes.
So I think an informational meeting, not a public hearing right off, but, just to say, we're looking at regulations pertaining to boat lifts and ramps.
Okay. And we
and
can,
piers, rather.
maybe we can get something back by the next meeting we have, like some feedback, and we can just report back to you, say, here's what we've heard. And now you can
Good.
just tell us how you'd like us to proceed.
Perfect.
That'll work.
Yeah, and soliciting the written comments back, I think, is a excellent idea, because we're getting to the end of the summer season, and there are a lot of seasonal property owners on the lake, and
Yes.
I just know from past experience, if
yes.
you're trying to regulate anything around the lake, don't do it after Labor Day, because they're going
They're
to
no
feel
longer
like they've
around.
been cut out of the discussion.
Right.
But
They'll
if
be
they're
pulling.
sent a letter and self-addressed stamped envelope, jot down your comments and send it back by such and such a date, I don't think anybody will feel left out that way.
Awesome.
Okay.
It's a good idea. That sounds good.
Agree.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, very well. Planning commissioners and staff, is everyone finished with what they wanted to say about this item number 7?
Right.
In that case, we'll go on to item number 8, which is recommendations for future agendas. Back in June, we did talk about a definition for wayfinding signs, and we didn't have that come back this time because really that relates to a city policy, and that's still being discussed with Main Street and with the Chamber of Commerce. So in really the only zoning duty, as it were, would be a definition. And I think the end of the definition could just say subject to city wayfinding signage policy. And could be tacked on to the end of that definition, and that would be the only zoning duty necessary, I would
And then what,
guess.
they just come, then they could give us a proposal, and then we could just approve something?
The
Well,
proposed
the-
policy would go to the council for their approval,
Mhm.
and so that the language of what that policy is going to look like and the locations of that wayfinding signage would be approved by the council.
This might be a silly question, but I totally understand wayfinding signage because it's real popular up north, you know. But is there any visible plans yet? Did they come up with literally with an idea of how they would look? You know, because apparently they're going to be, you know, they're going to be all the same, correct? They're not going to be.
No, they aren't going to be all the same. We already have wayfinding signage up and down South and North Main Street. That's the more typical wayfinding sign policy, and that's already in place. It's already been approved, and those signs already exist. This would be an amendment to that policy that will allow for certain commercial entities that aren't on a main drag somewhere to be able to have one sign, or possibly, depending on the circumstances, 2 signs located in a specific area that would direct people back to their location.
For instance, then, would it be something similar to if you're heading south and you're at the southern stoplight by the new restaurant on the right there? Would it be something in the park that would have an arrow that said Century Foods or Doyle's Dogs, or I just don't quite understand. What are they really looking for?
What we're thinking about is like a sandwich board type sign that would go in the right-of-way in the downtown area, just like the typical sandwich board signs. But what would be atypical about this is if you are located not in the B1 area downtown, but you are B1 nonetheless, you're allowed to have a sign that has the name of your business and an arrow that would direct people in the general direction. Because, you know, in the past we had issues with people with sandwich board signs all over the place with no regulations about where they're supposed to be located. This would at least regulate the size of the sign, the location of the sign, and the number of the sign. And it would be very limited as to which kinds of businesses, depending on where they're located, could take advantage of that policy.
It's important to note that this would be generally administered by the Main Street group. They would determine what's appropriate, what's not appropriate,
Awesome.
how they're going to be handled, located, et cetera. That's best for downtown, for Main Street, and the businesses off of downtown.
I talked to her, and I just hadn't heard the design part. I had no idea, and I don't think at the time I talked that they knew either. So
I think that's what they're still working out.
I see.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea, but
It's no longer in the infancy stage, but it's probably toddler now or preschool.
I
So
see.
we're
Okay.
still working on it.
awesome.
All right. Anything else regarding future agendas? Okay. All right, with that, we go on with item number 9, adjournment.
Excuse me,
Yes.
may I add something to your future agenda?
Well, then kindly approach the podium. And
My name is Bob Gergen from 242 Edgewater Drive, Bloomingdale, Illinois, and I represent Scholastic Enterprises. And I had a couple of questions for you, and I have to really give you a lot of compliments on how you handled the boat pier situation. And one thing I didn't see you do is consider if the resident with a pier had maybe a very steep backyard, 40, 50 steps up, and he had no other place to park it in his front yard. Just a suggestion. My questions for you in the future are, what is the future of Sandy Beach and the mobile home park? That's the first one. Second one is Sandy Beach and the mobile home park for sale?
Sir, that's not anything that the Plan Commission would be taking up, so we would refer you to the city manager.
Okay. And if so, is there a price tag if it's for sale?
Well, again, that's not anything that we would take up here, and I would refer you to the city manager on your questions. So I recommend that's a good starting point for the questions you're posing,
Including the first one?
all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's Steve Wilkie, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Super. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, we are still on number 9, adjournment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone against, same sign. We're adjourned.